In an attempt to explain man's present mental position, one chap came up with the single bullet theory, but whose possible efficacy was overcome by his corollary discovery of the multiple guns reality. Another secret peek into the inner workings of civilization. Self-promotion provides benefit in two areas, in self and in promotion. In case you haven't already figured this out, it's like this in all mental-based situations. Say, listen, in case you haven't figured this out either, civilization is a super neat arrangement. Hey, why do you think that intellectually life gave everyone 2 feet on each leg anyway? Laying down the speculative tome in his hands, the man turned to the librarian and said, I am a time-space continuum. And she asked, who are you? And he replied, I am man. In the land of opportunity, mad dogs are not tried or counseled. Mad dogs are dead dogs. There is no gray save in the world of black and white the mind has made. As recess was drawing to an end, one kid said to the others, let's start pretending we're crippled and handicapped. It'll work. It'll work. It will work. It's got to work. Whenever the dumb king took over the throne and would ask the royal philosopher what seemed like a deep question, the wise one would always react, oh, goody, a quiz game. What's the prize? What'd I win? And now, the mathematics of it all. Far more people think they know what's going on than actually know. Advanced mathematics. Even those who think they know what's going on know that they don't really. The extreme banker said to his son, don't worry about your investments going down the drain. You're going down the drain. And the boy asked what he could do about it. And his father said he wasn't sure. Life on the street level front lines. To believe that at any moment there is an objective truth that can and should be obvious to everyone is to continue to mistake a wedge for sinews and anger for understanding. As he paced the floor, one of the gunmen began trying to explain themselves to the captives they held. We are not bad people. And a woman with a child asked, who are you? And he replied, we are a man. To the point. It's not that everything you know is wrong. It's that everything you know is irrelevant to the secret. Now for a progress update. Sports remain more popular than debates. Only the simple of mind can be intellectually offended. A man with a tired mind will rest his head in his hand, his elbow on the table on the floor, and put his mind to work figuring out how to construct a better floor. The march of progress runs on one fuel, man, and carries but one cargo, man. Nothing's fairer than fair, and nothing is fairer than man. Man in the firm grip in midst of life. Today's tale. For many years, one land was totally ruled by hormones. Then they were overthrown, and the people wandered uncertainly about, asking, what the hell had happened? In the past, and in the past of today, there are those who say that poverty and ignorance can be abolished. They claim that a proper assault on the dual principalities of body and mind with the weapons of morality and education that with that, the peaceable kingdom of heaven on earth can be behaviorally produced. Today's moral. The future comes to those who wait, but more so to those who intelligently run to meet it. As the ship came to a stop in mid-ocean, a man appeared on deck and said to the passengers, "It is all too easy to lose your way and not know where you are." And someone asked, "Who are you?" And he replied, "Why, I am man." The speaker addressing the convention presented them this query: why do those who amount to so little intellectually so love to talk about I? And from the audience a voice replied, "Well, there's your answer." Later that afternoon, during the cocktail reception, some trouble arose just outside the main ballroom, apparently based on the following verbal interplay between two of the conventionaires. I'm quoting now. "Being simple of mind can certainly make one hostile." "Hey, what the hell do you mean by that?" In read behavior and personal anecdotes. If the most interesting things that have ever happened to you are things that have happened to you, then not much interesting has ever happened to you. That certain neural change, as exemplified by Buddha's night of renunciation, is not a denouncing of what one has done before, but an abandoning of it. The religious attempt by various physical rituals to symbolize their public rebirth, while the mystical do so privately in their thinking. The car salesman was attempting to clarify the matter to the customer. "Okay, look, if everybody wants some kind of attention, then those with no talent want it the most." And the guy replied, "Yeah, I get it. To make up for not having any abilities deserving of attention." The predetermined equanimity inherent in closed systems is such that life can safely offer each and every person a full lifetime warranty. An investigation update. Some supporters and critics alike say that rumors have become too noisy. If you have to ask what this means, you wouldn't get it even if I told you. And now this item concerning human mentation. Upon opening his eyes and looking up from his supine position, he found himself surrounded by masked faces staring back down at him. And one of them says, "We're going to have to operate." And he managed to respond, "But I'm not ill." And the voice replied, "No matter, we're still going to operate." And no need to ask about this one either, I might add. One advantage ignorance has over intelligence is that the former can easily exist in a crowd, while the latter cannot. Point-blank idea is how few neighbors, in that the ordinary generally find them too blunt to live near. The Prozacs of Peace, the Trials of Turmoil. The title. If you quit trying, you quit awakening. But if you quit trying, you can at least then try to quit thinking about it. So, what's to be learned? This: every effort has its own reward, even the lack of effort. And if you can accept this as reasonable, hey, get out of here. Small kitchen appliances and the meaning of life. Everyone is on a mission. Everyone is a juicer. And in the background, the all-city transcendental choir began to softly sing, "Extract me, mama, 8 to the bar." After his private conversation with some wandering monks, the king said to the court philosopher, You know, every time I talk to guys like those, I come away with the feeling that mystics are just fanatics, but without an agenda. And the slightly bemused savant turned away his head as he thought, as is so often true, I suspect it as well, that you do not actually understand what you just said. For in your case, forget bliss. Ignorance is power, and the means of its continuing exercise. Hint, again, the king in those stories represents part of the... Oh, don't thank me. Oh, we won't. The man by the produce truck said that he had personally started taking the idea of psychological treatment seriously as soon as its practitioners realized that it has the same problems and dynamics as trying to fix a leaky roof. Whilst on a sunny, toxic, heart-attacking mountain hike, a man stopped and suddenly thought, we don't destroy the environment. The damn thing destroys us. As they waited for the drill to cool down a bit, the woman asked the dentist, is being able to think anything like being more conscious? And he replied, well, yes, as a matter of fact, it can be if you'll only think of things you've never thought about before and only think about them once. Ordinary men would have no intellectual life did not others write it for them. Viability. Continuing frustration is an aspect of continuing evolution. The living mental world of man is unique twinfold. It is simply unique in that it is one of a kind, but doubly so in that while it can be perfectly described and detailed, so long as it is alive and healthy, it can never be fully achieved. To say that satisfaction equals death is no mere proverb to a mystic, but rather words to live by. With what seemed to be the hint of a threat in his voice, a man told the mayor, I did not name my oldest son Horatio Wiedermeyer for nothing. And in spite of the apparent warning and the official's nod in recognition thereof, he continued to run the city same as before. And a viewer writes, I listened to the above with full attention, yet I still must ask, what does it mean? Sir, what do you think it means? Now for some travel news. The powerful don't have to be reasonable, nor the knowing forthcoming. To a mystical warrior, confession is not good for the soul. Confession is not good for anything. The man at the chalkboard laid down his pointer and said to the assembled, what my colleagues and I are after, but have not yet found, is quite simple. We seek the truth. And someone asked, who are you? And he replied, we are man. We are man operating in your name, on your behalf. The man in the leather jacket, lightly slapping the whip against his leg, said to those gathered around him, we have one simple rule here, and that is, never let a professional comedian ride a horse for the first time. And they all took the news like a man. Out of all of the descriptions you could lay on man, out of all of the attempted singling out of him verbally, Let me give you a new one. It is not simply the power. The word is going to be control. And it's not simply the full realization of its exercise, but consider control. First, consider that which ordinary minds normally have no need to account for. But first off, notice that man is singular at the common level. He is singular at the bio-survival level. He is singular still at the level in which he is non-singular, physically speaking, with all the other creatures on this planet. Would you care to explain that? Oh, all right. No one comes close to the control man has at the most physical level. This begins to almost split up small hair-like molecules. But consider, if we can for a second, if you try and just theoretically picture man for the sake of this intro, of being able to, we could cut him into mind and body, if that were possible. Just from here down, in the same way that he has the same sort of demands, the same sort of limitations as every other sentient creature does on this planet, he is still, it's almost an insult to say he's unique at that level, because no one even comes close. Notice even the creatures, in that sense, which is the only operative, practical one of sentient, is actually move about in the environment, apparently react to the environment. The highest level of primates, as opposed to a rock, as opposed to a tree. I mean, the most intelligent of the trees are more or less stuck where they are. But the creatures who move about, creatures of elephants, of chimpanzees, the water dries up at a certain water hole, they move on. They seem to even already have it built in. Well, let's try to give them a little credit. The water hole gives out, and they do not stand there necessarily and thirst to death. They will move on. But that is not even close to what man has accomplished at the crudest level. We're just talking about the survival level. That is the control that man has exercised. We take it so much for granted, but no one even comes close. It's not even comparable. As I said, it's almost insulting to point out that it's singular. In fact, man, what passes for progress normally is at the physical level, which I'm sure all of us avail ourselves of, all the technology. But notice what man is given credit for without it being distinguished in this way is an absolute astounding singularity at the physical level, which is what all technology is, if you never thought about it. In other words, man does not have to move around to a water hole. But you understand, if we're going to look at it as being somewhat of a progressive or relative idea, we could say that elephants or chimpanzees or orangutans are more intelligent perhaps than a slug or a frog. We'll just say that if they get to a place where there's been water, they've been going there for years and years, and for whatever reason the water hole this year has dried up, they will move on. Whereas a slug, creatures with a less developed nervous system, less developed brain, may come there and just stand and sit and die. Now, we're not going into the programming, et cetera, et cetera. I'm just making it that I'm using the kind of examples that even ordinary minds up to this point would tolerate. I'm taking their kinds of descriptions. They would say, well, in some sense, you're right, an elephant is more intelligent, or an orangutan is obviously, in a sense, more intelligent. They might want to go intelligent. And we'd say, yeah, we know what you mean. Then, perhaps a slug or a frog, that they will get to a place that they are in the habitual pattern of finding nourishment, finding a place to get out of the element, and they get there and the whole thing's changed. And they will just stand there like, well, someday the water hole will fill back up, and they will stand there and dehydrate to death. You understand? Whereas an elephant come up, he's got no experience, he's been coming there for 50 years. This time he comes up, he sniffs around, he looks, and he determines there is no water. Maybe he waits 5 or 10 minutes, maybe a day, and there's still no water. An elephant will move on. Now that, relatively speaking, he is of a higher intellectual level, even in quotation marks, than a frog or any beast, any animal would come along and not know what to do once the programmed pattern of habit that kept him alive has been interrupted. But man just goes off the chart to then try and say, well, there is a form of evolution going on, and you're right, and at least using those kind of examples, we can say, well, here's a slug, and up here's a hippo, maybe here's an elephant, and up here's an orangutan, and then, wait, here's man. No, man, no. He's not only off that chart, he's off that wall. He's not even that same, because look what man's done. Now, you could right quick, if you wanted to play the kind of caveman cartoon strip history and say, well, somewhere along the line, he caught on that not only that there's another water hole, but he doesn't waste his time. Whereas an elephant or orangutan may hang around for 2 or 3 days, waiting for the water to suddenly appear. A man gets there, and it's not, he sees no water, he knows immediately to go somewhere else. That's not progress. I mean, it sounds like it. Look what man's done. Don't have to go any further. We don't have to worry about it. You go in there and turn the faucet. Man has taken control of the environment, his necessary environment, to such a degree that is astoundingly overwhelming to the point, as I was trying to get you to see, that is not normally taken into any particular account. I haven't seen anything yet that any sane person would disagree with it. They go, well, sure. I mean, we all know that. But it's not even taken into account. And the only reason I am stressing it now is to set you up for the continuation. We're going to have to jump back and forth because I want you to see, in part, what holds people ordinarily back through them being distracted, holding them back under a serious cloud of quotation marks. We then get into the world of the intellect, which is, as you all know, that's quite misleading once you see, for me to draw these kind of lines to say, well, we're talking about man physically and then man mentally. There is no such thing. If there is, you are past the point of being handicapped. You're not human. There is no such division. If it is artificial. It is a malady. It is an anomaly. It does not happen. But keep that in mind. Intellectually, what is man up to? Now, if any ordinary mind, which many of you, I believe, brought yours with you probably tonight, up until now, you could follow that, which obviously must be something wrong here tonight. I mean, it's been 20 or 30 minutes and nothing I could find grievous exception to were I an ordinary person. Intellectually, if anyone had been following this, and I said, now we're going to move into the world that is, without any doubt, singular to man, the intellect. That no other creature here has anything resembling man's intellect, that he can invent, he can remember abstractly, he can deal with numbers, he can speak is what it amounts to. Then I could say, now we're still talking about control. And people say, well, I could see where you're going with that. That is what man is after. Now they, as I'm going to try to get you to consider, not only is it, in a sense, severely operationally overlooked to the degree to which he exercises control over the physical world, not only is that overlooked, that is so widespread that you're back to living in one room or living in a phone booth, remember, with a purple hippo, except you don't know it. To you, the color of your apartment's purple, and it has a strange odor, and there's certain places you can't sit. But beyond that kind of point blank being too obvious, in the world of the intellect is where ordinary people say, well, now you're getting somewhere because that is quite obvious. We think about that as all man's up to up here is control. Yes, and I hate to tell you, but no. Yes, if anybody said that, nod along with them, go, oh yeah, you're right. Which they are right. Except for this. The mental world of man, do you remember the one I read? The living, mental, neural world of man is unique twinfold. It is unique first simply because the mental world is unique. No other creature has it. But then it's unique in the second way, that is now you got to remember the first form of uniqueness is uniqueness. There is only one uniqueness, definition 1 in your dictionary. That is, it is truly singular. But it's singular for the reason it's singular. If something's unique, it's unique. But man's is unique twice. The second one is this mental world, this neural world that's unique to him, that he can describe, he can define it. That's what all religion's about. It's what all philosophy is about. It is what all technology is about. It's what all speech that goes beyond the level of passive salt. Anything that aspires to being creative or cultural or spiritual, something worthy of man, when it gets to that level, he is describing heaven on earth. He is describing in detail. Psychology does it. Sociology does it. Politics does it. All civilized people, other than I say just the common everyday mundane chit-chat, anything aspiring to serious conversation is a detailing. It's a description of how life should be. And here's where it's unique. Man's mind can describe that thing down to the last drop. Now I say, man, you can. All you got to do is ask somebody, what if there was some sort of heaven, or there was forces and we could just create a living utopia? What would it be? Any sane person can immediately tell you. And if you don't look at it in that wide of a philosophical scope, you could just ask somebody, what would it take to make you happy in life? Do you know? Any sane person go, for sure I know. You say, well, just tell me, just for fun. You know, what would be the ideal life for you? They can describe it. The second uniqueness of man's mental world is that although it can be described in minute detail, I mean to the point that you can ask somebody, now you sure you've described what heaven would be or the ideal life? And they go, oh yeah. Have you left out anything? I got time. And they think of everything they could possibly want, the way they want their life arranged, their kind of relationship, everything. You go, now that's it. And they go, oh yeah. You know, as long as we're playing it, yeah, that's everything. So they have described the ideal. They have described intellectually total fulfillment. It is unique now at the twin level in that it can never be achieved. Think about it. Now we've got to start jumping back and forth right quick. At the physical level, man is exercising control. But also remember, any creature, even below man, relatively speaking on that kind of evolutionary scale, any frog that is alive is exercising some control. Follow me on this. They're exercising some control. Forget the relative intelligence right now for 1 second. But they are exercising some control. That is, they're alive. And forget the intellectual debate on, well, how did they stay alive? If they're alive, they're exercising some control. If they're not alive, you remember my mountain climber that was engaged in that sunny day, toxic, heart-attacking, invigorating mountain climb, and he suddenly realized, we don't destroy the environment. The damn thing destroys us. Just to put things in perspective in case you ever took a hike such as that. The frog, if he is alive, is exercising, in a sense, some control. Man is exercising greater control because he does not have to go out and seek water. He can make water come to him. At that level, control equates with satisfaction, because control equates with survival. If the frog could talk for a second and you said, I see you're alive, and the frog said, yeah. And you said, I guess you got some control over life. And if the frog, you're just going to have to follow this in your own head, and the frog could go, yeah. And you could say, well, you don't meet many frogs that even have your vocabulary. And you go, oh, okay. You can say, well, what does control mean? Now think about what, if you were at that kind of level with just a minimal ability to speak, you've gone up as high as the biophysical survival level of a creature could go, and now you're just to the point you can barely verbalize something about it. What would control be to you? What would satisfaction be? There's no you wouldn't, if you're following this, you got right to the level of where the intellect starts. You don't sit around and think, let's see, what would be satisfaction? Or you can ask somebody, what is your goal in life? If you could just ask the body, what are your goals in life? You know what's funny? And your body think, goals, plural? It has but one goal, survival. So any control is satisfaction. Any control is You eat, you're satisfied. That is control. You're tired, you sleep. You're cold, you get in a place where it's warm. Or you find another wolf or hippo and you get up against it and get some of its heat. That is control. And in that sense, it is satisfaction. If there's anything less than satisfaction, it is less than the total effort at that time of survival. You understand? Or to make it absolute. If you're not totally satisfied, if you do not eat enough to get totally satisfied, you're on the way to starvation. That when you eat enough that you're satisfied for that moment, that is success. That is control. That is satisfaction. There's an end to it right then. In other words, if we were just talking to the body and you just gotten through with a meal, and we could talk to your stomach and say to your mind and said, how's life going? And your stomach would go, your stomach would say, quite well. You say, do you have anything lacking in life? I know it's almost silly every time we go through it. That is it. Again, if your stomach is sane, it's got right to the point that it is satiated for the moment. It's heaven. It's utopia. There's nothing to talk about. You can't say, what more do you want? Anything more than that is past satisfaction. Anything more than that begins to distract from it. The mind, the mental world of man, at the double level, at the second level of singularity, is that it can describe. If the stomach could talk, and we came up to a stomach that was hungry right then, between meals, and you said, I'm a junior, I'm doing a survey, could you describe what would be satisfaction in life? What would be, he goes, eat. That's it. I mean, it's simple to put. You know, do you have anything else to add? I mean, what's to add? It's like, you know, if you were tired and you asked the body, what would you like to do? Sleep. Well, could you be a bit more forthcoming? Could you elaborate? How are you going to elaborate? You either do it or you don't. The mind can describe in detail. See, the stomach would just say, are you satisfied? And it might go, what would it take to make you satisfied? Food. There's nothing else to say. The mind can describe what would make it happy. It can describe its individual idea of happiness, satisfaction, fullness in detail, and can continue to improve upon it, or at least elaborate. It can describe the day, what it would take to make it happy. And all you've got to do is ask a mind and say, is that all? And the mind, just think about it. You know, it's the mind go, well, all right. And it will go on and on. It might get finally tired or run out of things right now. And you say, well, all right, this offer is going to be open for another week. So I'll check with you tomorrow. And you go, good. Because sure as hell, if you don't go in and suffer some serious brain damage, tomorrow it will continue to expand, which is one that was thrown in that said the phrase satisfaction equals death is not some mere hollow or even profound sounding proverb to a mystic. It's words to live by. But to the ordinary mind, it would be if it understood it. Or the other one, if you didn't like that one, it was entitled viability. For those of you that don't like that word anymore, progress. But viability. How about viability and the question of progress? Or progress and the question of viability. And this extensive survey went as follows. It's one sentence. It said that continuing frustration is an aspect of continuing evolution. The stomach does not evolve, that is, man's body does not evolve, because it is not continually frustrated. You want me to redo the extensive essay? Continuing evolution requires continuing frustration. Now you understand, we're talking about man, and we're talking about... But mentally, continuing frustration would equal destruction. Forget evolution, forget progress, it equals death. You can't be continually frustrated from the survival level down. You can skip a meal here or there. You can go 2 days without sleep. You can go 2 or 3 days without water, but after that, au revoir. It cannot tolerate continual frustration. That should be simple enough. But for the mind to progress at the collective level, at the general evolutionary level, it cannot be anything but frustrated. That is not necessarily the word that's used. It can be, people can say from what would appear to be a more positive view, they can say, well, what helps support, what helps fuel the evolution of man is intellectual inquiry, curiosity. They can say that, but you understand it's the same thing. It's curiosity like, I wonder if I could make water, we could put it up. I wonder if gravity works. Oh, yeah. All right, if we took water artificially and we put it up high here above our caves and run some little bamboo poles down here and put stoppers, you know, the water runs downhill like that in the creeks. What if we just put it up here in a hollowed out hippo skull or something, or hippo's stomach, and then we could pull out this plug in our caves and water would come in, we wouldn't have to go outside. That's intellectual curiosity, but it's also dissatisfaction. The caveman's wife says, go get us some water, I'm hot. You know, Jesus. And he figures out how to bring it inside. You can call it intellectual curiosity. I know that's what it would, the praises to that are sung more often than the praises to dissatisfaction. But it is all the same thing. If the intellect could ever be satisfied collectively or individually, and there, again, the history of man through fables, myths, religious allegory are full of these stories. Not that the people who even told them recognized it, but are full of stories of someone who almost got their wish, or did get their wish. And what did it do? Oh boy. Right there at the end, you could just tell. They just wished it had never happened. You remember? King Midas. One thing he wanted to make life satisfied. You know, the clean version is he finally patted his favorite daughter on the head. The Alabama version is he went to take a leak. And everything he touched turned to gold on him. Oh my God. The mind, the intellectual world of man can never be fully achieved. Now it gets within a parade, within this closed system, there are areas that do reach a kind of internal subplotting termination, or achievement, if you want to look at it this way, completion, and they do terminate. In case any of you, I've been through this before, in case you want another way to look at it, there are things there, and I don't mean just dinosaurs, I use them for the children's minds, since it seems to be something obvious, but look at all the ideas in life, the political theories, the beliefs, and they come and they go, and they'll pop back up under other guises, but there will apparently be something of a strictly intellectual nature, like, well, communism right now. In our lifetime, if you were dense enough that you thought communism was actually, or anything's actually some sort of intellectual floating cloud of knowing or potential. But anyway, now it is, let's just use ordinary terminology. Here it is, we've seen in the last 4 or 5 years, this worldwide, world-reaching political theory of communism has now been discredited. Now it just fell apart in just a matter of months, it seemed like, and now it just, everywhere it's just a laughing stock. People pushing over the statues of its founders and spitting on it. Whereas 2 weeks before they were laying wreaths at its feet. Let's assume, I'm just using that so that you know what I'm talking about. Let's assume that communism, that name, that's the end of it. Well, right now it is the end of it. It ran its course, whatever the hell it was. It was a dinosaur. And I'm not making a political judgment. They're religions. Zoroastrianism. I mean, as much as we all love to say it. Now, I mean, as neat as the guy must have been to wear a mask and carry a whip. Is that the same? Well, generally. I mean, now we're down to like just a few thousand people on the planet. And at one time, and even historically, the point being, it was of such an impact, according to history, I'm just going along with everybody else, that it is worthy of complete chapters. Anytime you see a book on the history of religion on this planet, But the point is, it is no longer of any particular value. It is not put to use. It was just one of those things. And intellectually, if something does reach apparent fulfillment, and at the time it may necessarily look like that. It may look like a failure. See, it's what gets sort of, well, if you can think, it doesn't get sticky, but it gets sticky to talk about. But you understand communism. Let's say right now this is a thing of the past. It's been discredited. That's what they're saying now politically. But right then it wasn't. When I say that things do not, if there's alive intellectually in man, that is a continual form of frustration in that they can never be fully achieved. And now I point out to you that sometimes within the system, things apparently at a sub-level, or certain little aspects, individual local areas seem to reach a form of completion. That is, they run their course and they're gone. But at the end, it's not like, it's achievement. It looks like right then, well, geez, the whole thing fell apart. It looked like total failure. The failure of communism. But there's no way to look at it. A better way for someone who's trying to change your own level of understanding, it was not in a sense a failure. It was a success. That in a minor sense, it reached this term. It aborted, or it had a kid. The kid came out with a blank on its face. The pregnancy's over. The time's over. The wild duck's been shot. That particular line is finished for the time being. So it's gone. Once it's gone, the point is, it doesn't matter to say whether it failed or it succeeded. It's gone. Now, the intellectual life of man, the reason I labeled that one, or titled that one page, viability, the collective life of man himself being alive intellectually, the intellect never gets satisfied. Now, that is just put it that simply, could not be labeled any astounding revelation to humanity, because ordinary people go, you're right. They might then want to sit down and debate it theoretically or cut corners of. But the mind cannot be satisfied. The intellect of man cannot be satisfied, whereas physically he can be satisfied. Intellectually, there is no such thing as satisfaction this side of, save a termination of some particular line, which in a sense is finally achieved, some form of finality, but it's the end of it. So intellectually speaking, there is no such thing as satisfaction. There is no such, the frustration itself, continuing frustration, is an aspect of continuing evolution. Now consider everything from religion into the real specifics of attempted forms of changing one's consciousness, the attempts to reach the kind of nervous system nirvana, a kind of Buddhahood, a kind of place wherein that Buddha himself, to use the translations, I'll accept them again, he described nirvana after the little questions and answers. As you have reached the point, there is no longer this struggle, whether it was literal or figurative, of being reborn, of continuing to move up the caste system, to continue to move up from being a slug to an orangutan to a human. Nirvana is, when they finally ask him, well, if you reach the priestly class, if you reach the highest caste, why would you even try to do better after that? We got you there. He went, no. If you go through all that and you make it, let's just assume, he answered him, the point is, after that, it's recess. You don't have to do anything. Now, no translation I've ever seen gives any report of what the monks that were questioning him said after that. Of course, they had any sense. What can you say after that? Do. There, put in another context, is what we're talking about. But then consider the position it puts someone in when they're trying to achieve that sort of understanding, when they're trying to push on whatever they were calling it, trying to become more awake, trying to become more conscious, trying to reach enlightenment, trying to achieve satori. Anything you think about it, it sounds like, well, it's something I have got to achieve, and it will bring me satisfaction. What else can you say? If you ask somebody, are you still attending such and such Zen school? Are you going to this meditation group? Or are you reading books about changing your consciousness? Yeah. And you still interested? Well, yes, I am. I'll spend a lot of time and money doing it. And you really think you'd enjoy it? I mean, you think that's what you want in life? Now, someone who is a sincere would-be seeker of the truth or of mysticism, The question is, it's not even offensive, it's just stupid. To say, well, are you sure that's what you want? And you think, well, I've devoted, other than making a living and doing all the dumb things that people normally do, just being here on this planet, other than that, the better parts of my life have been striving to do this. And so the answer, you might not even answer somebody, but you think, well, sure, I know that's what I want. Even that, having the full experience, I know that's what I want. I know it would satisfy me. And then look at the difficulty, to say the least, in trying to think about it, trying to talk about it, trying to find where does it exist. And for the last 50 minutes or so, I've been trying to get you to consider the fact that not only does it not exist, it cannot even be talked about. And the reason it can't be talked about is, I just told you, because it doesn't exist. All right, I'll put it to you another way on the spot, another instant news item proverb from yours truly. A mystic is someone who can commit suicide and still live. Mentally, of course, because that's what it is. Give you a variation. We were closing up, or I did close up with it last time. I know it didn't strike all that many bells. I was talking about pointing out to you how people, even at the public and apparent intellectual level, the people that will say something that seems to be memorable, that seems to be insightful, are loath, as a rule, to take credit for it. You recall, I was pointing out this. One reason people love speech writers, they love Vedi Mikams, Bibles, Holy Scriptures. Even the Holy Scripture is the works of Karl Marx back when communism was flying. By Holy Scriptures, what I mean is a Lenin or somebody got there and try to create attention, bring attention to himself, and get some kind of control over people, and come up with this idea that the capitalists, those that are controlling the money, and those who are controlling the land on this planet, are always taking advantage of us, the working people, the bourgeoisie, the proletariat. We got to do something about it. And somebody goes, yeah, that sounds pretty good, but who the hell are you? Never mind who I am. I'm just a messenger here for, in ways, Karl Marx or Jesus or Buddha. And I ask you toward the end of our last little get-together, does it not appear, once you see it, that men seem almost fearful of being original? Even if the guy said it. Even if he thought it up, he'll get out there in public. A priest, a rabbi, a politician, a king. Someone who has, you would think, nothing to fear, and he would go up and say, well, as a wise man told me when I was just a young prince. And it's something he thought up. And he's just sure it's important. Like I said, even the king, they're going to laugh anyway. I mean, if he smiles, they're going to laugh. If he looks serious, they're all going to look serious. So he knows it's going to go. And he still won't take credit. And I ended up with sort of the rhetorical question, not sort of the rhetorical question, the rhetorical question. Could it be that men in some way have what seems to be a fear, at least an aversion, to being original? And I ended it then by asking you, could this not be perhaps a damn near supreme definition of the more awakened, of a mystic, of being more conscious, is you've got no fear of being original. That almost sounds cheap, and that's where we ran out of tape, because it sounded like, well, it's somebody that would just, I didn't say flown it, I didn't even say even point it out, but I said had no fear. Because a mystic's not going to be living his life, his intellectual life in public anyway. If he does, he ain't no mystic. That's why he's dressed funny. So I had no sense not to wear that funny shirt this time. You're not going to be living a mystical life. The Buddhas and all that, I've been through this, but you do not live that kind of life externally. That's history. That's it becoming crude and being turned into fodder for ordinary people. If there was a guy named Buddha, if there was somebody behind that, or a Moses or a Jesus, what they did in private. What they did mainly in their head, and what little came out may have been to a few people. But then the stories about them going out in public and raising the sick and speaking to all these people and telling them that did not happen. Not to people like that. Those who followed him either made it up or they may have done it, but he didn't do it, because you don't live that life in public. You can't, but you do not. Then the question, back to where we were, I was going to present to you tonight a variation of that. Could that be, back to where I was, that a definition could be someone of a real definition of a mystic, someone who is not afraid of originality. But now remember, we're not talking about going out here in public and painting pictures or writing music or saying, a man once told the mayor, with a hint of warning in his voice, I did not name my eldest son Horatio Wiedemeyer for nothing. And then pull your cloak around you and put on your turban and wander off. And you follow what I'm getting at? That, if you say, well, that's originality. No. If you're going to do that, you do it in your head. And you only do it once. And only you know what it means. You do not do it out there. And so the fear of originality is not fear of being laughed at, because you don't let anybody else know it. You don't tell anybody that kind of story. I just do it for other reasons. So you do it in here. When I say that, when I was asking, is perhaps one of, or a potentially supreme definition of mystic is someone who does not have an aversion to originality. You understand what I'm inferring, don't you? It's kind of a backhanded hint. Not only do you not have an aversion to originality, that's the only thing you can tolerate. The rest of it is, as us mystics say, unadulterated hippo shit. It's entertainment, it's noise, it's a song in the night. It's someone whistling, extract me mama 8 to the bar. For those, I'll try it again. Maybe you folks better ask your mother or grandmother. But now tonight, can you see that control, when I said suicide, I was going to give you another 2 nights in a row, another potentially ultimate definition of a mystic, someone who can commit suicide and yet live. But now the committing of suicide is, you do not deal in anything but original thought. You do not deal in anything except thoughts that no one ever told you. Now, Adam tonight said that ordinary men would not have an intellectual life. Did not others write it for them? And you can say, we've been through this, but it doesn't matter whether you're pro or con. And you do know that it passes for, it always has, but it still passes. For being an intellectual, if you got to distinguish yourself in some way, you distinguish yourself how? By distinguishing yourself against some other person, some other form. I'm an intellectual, I think for myself. I never noticed that about you. Well, all right, let me point this out. All right, the profession I'm in, I am surrounded. If you don't know this, it's pretty common knowledge. I am surrounded. The whole profession is, I bet 9% easy, people of a conservative, reactionary political view. And I have to make a living. That's what I trained for. And anyway, I now see things in a different way. And I'm in such a position. I guess it may be hurting my career. I may be running some risk. But I will not hesitate to stand up and speak a more liberal, progressive view. At least, well, even when I don't sit there and nod along with them. I am critiquing. I see the flaws in it. You understand? It passes being intellectual or reverse. It doesn't matter. That's King Midas. You go, well, wait a minute. They say such and such is true, but let me think about this. And they never notice, oh my God. Or if they did, they'd like the story and say, well, that's okay. I turn my brain into gold. I got news for you. Your brain's gold, lead, magnesium. What's the difference? It be inert. Yes, but I'm inert in a way that is not the same as everyone else around me. Well, all right, okay. Now we're getting somewhere. You first say I was going to give you a real quick, where I'll tape again, give you a quick little step vis-a-vis my comment that another potential edge of the cliff definition of a real thinker or someone more conscious or a mystic would be someone who can commit suicide and yet stay alive. Because every other form, if an ordinary person can get satisfied, it is a form of suicide. That is not strange whatsoever. The common version of that, a known version, everybody recognizes, somebody can get so rich, it's an old story, that they almost die of ennui. Get so rich, they can have so much sex, so much food, and they just live the most desperate, the most dissolute life possible, get everything in the world they want, and finally one day they sit down and go, yeah, because there's nothing. And you can make it sound philosophical. Not them, but somebody who's not that rich and envy them. They make it sound like, well, if man does not have the continuing need to reach for the stars, to achieve a new goal, he will die. That kind of thing. People, well, let me write that down. It's only certain people bother to write it down. But the point is, it is known. And all of you have had little pieces of it. It's like a little bitty death. But the real one, it has been pointed out again in fable and historically. It happens. That people just apparently just almost give up if you've got nothing to work for. And you don't even have to be rich necessarily. You can find it in people that seems to then be potentially a nervous system problem or neuroses of some kind. But you can find people living in near poverty, living in a trailer park. They just, couch potatoes. Somebody just sits there and they don't have any interest in life and they just let themselves go. And you think, it might be somebody you know or a relative, and you think, well, that damn person, they're almost dead. 25, 30 years old, and they may physically live, but you understand, and they just act like. You can say, why don't you clean yourself up and lose some weight, get out and get some exercise. You say, well, don't you want anything? Wouldn't you like to go out and date or something? Wouldn't you like to live longer? This sitting here with no exercise and all this weight, you're going to die early. So you understand, it is almost death. I know they wouldn't want to call that satisfaction, ordinary people, but you understand they are not striving, that in a sense they are satisfied where they are. I was suggesting to you that someone who had the nervous system fired up in their brain in a place that is not necessarily now of any, but is not needed now, then in a form you're committing suicide because you are answering, I assure you, a Buddha, to reach that kind of Buddhahood, the nirvana of no longer struggling to have to be reborn. What it is, in a sense, you have, in a different way, but you have reached the point of being a King Midas, of being rich. You have used up the past. That is Buddha's night of renunciation. You don't turn around and denounce what it was. You leave it. And so the point is, you're satisfied now with the past.